Welcome. Thank you very much for coming to this this session, promoting evidence-based policymaking towards sustainable and resilient food systems. We're looking forward to getting on. We have 4 speakers today, and I'll introduce them. 2 are online and 2 are here. And they'll be talking about action that we do in countries as sort of IFPRI country programs. And this is a really important way in which IFPRI has actual impact, our engagement with countries and the way that we do our work. I thought I would give you, for just a couple of minutes, a little overview of the way that we perceive what IFPRI's work is and what it does. And then these presenters can talk a bit about how we take those activities into countries in a bunch of different country cases. So at IFPRI, we think of our work as kind of being, we can put it into 3 buckets. And the first is sort of clarifying the situation and outlook. So this is, what is happening inside the country and where is this going, right? So this would include our work on measuring women's empowerment. What is the situation with women's empowerment inside a country? What's the status of poverty? What's the status of nutrition? We also do a fair amount of foresight, and that foresight can range from what's going to happen next month because we've now locked down our economy due to COVID, to what is the situation looking out to 2050 because of climate change, and we have various approaches for that. So that's one big bucket. And then a second bucket is what we call testing and scaling diverse solutions. So this is where a lot of our work looking at programs, randomized controlled trials, other elements would come into play. We do a lot of work in social protection. Does social protection help to buffer, for example, climate shocks? Can we design social protection programs such that they do really help make households more resilient? Can you make them more flexible such that you can expand or contract them, in accordance with need? All of these things are things that IFPRI works upon. Another more classic agricultural example is Nigeria is now, it's the first country to approve a genetically modified crop in Africa, food crop. And so there's a cowpea that is now being able to be distributed in Nigeria, and we're looking at a randomized controlled trial to see what's the difference between this new variety of cowpea and traditional cowpea. Last is sort of shaping the enabling environment, the policy stuff that IFPRI is known for. So this would be trade policies in food. This could be, we do a lot of work now in investment prioritization and investment packages. What investments would you make in order to achieve a multiplicity of goals? And then, other things like, say, the policy and regulatory environment around gene editing, other trade policies. We have a lot of work in repurposing agricultural subsidies. So those are the 3 big buckets: clarifying the situation outlook, testing and scaling diverse solutions, and shaping the enabling environment. So those are some of the assets that we try as IFPRI globally to bring and make available to country programs. And we're going to have Kevin talk briefly a little bit more about the country programs. Kevin Chen, who is our leader in China. Thank you, Kevin. Please come up.
Well, thank you very much, Channing. I do have a quick 2 slides to share with you. So I don't know who exactly going to put the slides on, and the country program, what we call it. As Channing mentioned, IFPRI is based in Washington, D.C. We can do a lot of things from D.C., of course, do policy analysis, but we do go to the country, many different countries. But however, over the course of the time, as the institute developed, we fully recognize doing things only from DC or travel to the country occasionally is not enough, right? So we need our foot in the country we are working. So IFPRI started the so-called using the decentralized approach. So we are set up the regional office, we are set up the country office across the global. And in this particular diagram, which you can see, we have South Asia regional office, for example. We have Africa regional office, and we have China office. We also look after this East and Southeast Asia. And we have Tajikistan office. We are also looking at the whole Central Asia. So those two offices, in the way, is quasi-regional office in that sense. And we have many individual country, what we call a country strategy supporting program. So if you look at that, we have, if I look from my left, you look at, we have China. Right now we focus on the food security and nutrition policy, food system transformation, and also rural revitalization. We have one in Pakistan, focused on the food security policy and the seed policy. We have one in Bangladesh. You're going to hear much more on Bangladesh a bit later on from my colleague. Focus on the gender policy and food and nutrition policy. We have one in Myanmar. The initial organizer of this session is our lead from Myanmar strategic program. But he, at the moment, is in the Laos. So he asked Chanyi and myself to present on behalf of his. So Myanmar, we have crisis assessments, humanitarian response, agri-food system policy. We have PNG, and we're going to hear much more on the PNG from Emily. And we focus on the climate resilience, food security, nutrition policy, agriculture growth, women's economic empowerment. And we have one in Ethiopia, focused on the recovery and growth strategy, agriculture policy, privatization, women's empowerment and livelihood. Tajikistan, I mentioned quickly already, we focus on the development strategy, food system, food and nutrition policy, and enabling environment. And Kenya, fertilizer policy, national development strategy, tax reform. Rwanda, we focus on the crop commercialization, livestock policy, public investment prioritization. Egypt on the food subsidy, social protection, wheat policy. Malawi, fertilizer subsidy, strategic grain reserve, urbanization. Sudan, crisis assessment, emerging response, recovery strategies. Ghana, input subsidy, nutrition policy, investment priority. Senegal, food system, food and nutrition policy, resilience strategies, and the regional trade. Nigeria, food security policy, climate resilience, crisis assessment, and so on. As you can see, there are some common themes our country office are focused on, but they are specific, country-specific issues in different country supporting office focus on as well. And over the time, we also, for example, in Pakistan, we also have office for many years, and which now is not, well, actually it's right there, but we are going to work more on Cambodia, Pakistan, and many more countries may come up. Depends on the needs, and it depends on the donors' support, where we need to go if we will be there to address the policy challenge. So with that, let me conclude my quick overview of IFPRI's country strategic support program. Thank you very much for your attention.
So we'll move on to Shahid Rashid, who is our director for South Asia. He's based in Delhi, but he's worked a lot and maintains from Bangladesh and maintains a lot of relationships with the Bangladesh country program, so he's going to talk about Bangladesh. Shahid, please. Oh, you're going to talk about, okay. Well, Bangladesh or Nepal. I was told Bangladesh. Okay, down here it says Nepal. All right, but please go ahead, Shahid.
Greetings to everyone online. Thank you, Channing, for clarifying what we do in the country program, and Kevin Chen for providing an overview of what we are doing across the globe. Also let me thank Bart Minton for putting together this session, although I don't see him here speaking. So I'm going to talk about the case of Bangladesh. If you can move to the next slide, please. So IFPRI's engagement in Bangladesh dates back over 4 decades. In fact, Bangladesh was one of the very small set of countries that IFPRI began engaging right after its founding in 1975. Bangladesh's first project, funded by the World Bank, was looking into the agricultural price policies. Why? Because it was a time when suddenly markets and famine became critically important. We are talking about late 76, when the definition of food security was very different. Focus was on availability. It was before Amartya Sen's famous work on exchange entitlement failure, poverty and famine came out. So you can see how things evolve over time. So on 3 core pillars of IFPRI engagement in Bangladesh, actually Channing has articulated it better. Understanding the context, I think that's what the partnership through research collaboration is. Going to a country to understand the context, we have to engage with the local institution, local partner to identify problem, work together, find solution, and engaging with the policymakers to implement it. So those 3 core pillars have been there: partnership, capacity strengthening, and the policy engagement. So my objective here today is to share essentially glimpses of these experiences in Bangladesh. Next slide, please. So this is essentially giving period-wise IFPRI's engagement in the country. Before I go into it, I'll actually be coming back by period, but before I go into it, let's think about for a moment the context in Bangladesh back in the mid-70s. It was the time when the memories of famine, a civil war, and a chaotic political situation, and famine that claimed over 1 million lives, and a destroyed infrastructure. So overall, on top of that, given the political instability and chaos, future was very uncertain. So overall landscape was very unfortunate, but coincidence of IFPRI getting involved, I think reflecting on it was a fortunate one. And then things evolved as our understanding of food security and development evolved. So that's where I'll go into with the next few slides. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the 1979, should have been 76 through 88. What are the research impacts? So as I said, the first ever engagement was on price policies. A common practice at that time was the dual pricing policies and providing ration to the poor. There was no targeting idea, there is no conditional transfer idea, there is no trade idea even at that time. So the initial engagement led to the formation of a unit called Food Planning and Monitoring Unit, which was initially established within the Planning Commission, but over time evolved, and IFPRI remained engaged with that. Now it coordinates across 17 ministries on the issues of food security and the food security information system. So follow-up to that study was to look at the infrastructural constraints. And that led to establishment of another big institution in the country called the Local Government and Rural Development at that time, but subsequently changed to Local Government and Engineering Department. But both are in existence and both are very active institutions in the country. So the first research report during that time on microfinance, Grameen Bank particularly, was published from IFPRI. It was long before microfinance became a global phenomenon. So IFPRI started that work in the early 80s, and the research report came out late. Of course, it used to take a lot of time doing it. And then what happened was a very large engagement under a project called Bangladesh Food Policy Program. It was led by a group of colleagues, but direct engagements of several colleagues from Washington, including Howard Pui, Francisco Goletti, Lawrence Hathat. There are many colleagues involved in that project. So in that project, let's move to the next slide. Okay, so what happened at that time? As I said before, food rationing was considered to be the social safety net to ensure food security around that time. So the rationing system was established in South Asia right after the Bengal famine of 1943 by the British. That continued. And there was some revision to it, but IFPRI conducted an extensive study on the cost of managing this program and the cost of leakage of the programs. So this was a study I think quite received a lot of attention. And then government basically called a meeting and said, well, what do you want us to do? Because when they stopped the rationing program, country built a big food stock. What do you do with that? I think that's when the idea of the conditional transfer program came. And Bangladesh started that program called Food for Education Program, FFE. Actually, it was the first of its kind globally. And it piloted initially, it has taken new shape, but in one way or another, that conditional transfer program continues in the country as an instrument for ensuring food security. Next, please. So this is another thing. Being on the ground, as Kevin pointed out, is important to understand the context and generate evidence for policy action. So now think about it. In 1998, Bangladesh experienced one of the worst floods in the history. The flood had caused 2.2 million tons reduction in rice production, and mass starvation, looming famine was widely predicted by the major global media, including economists and BBC. IFPRI researchers got directly engaged with the country's effort. In fact, IFPRI researchers at that time, Dr. Paul Laroche and Carlo Dell'Ino, were even sitting in a special unit created by the within the Prime Minister's office. And if you look back, where everyone was predicting 2 million people would die of starvation and famine, no one died. Or people died, but not because of food insecurity and hunger. All right, so that publication is there in the book, 1998 Flood, and Being on the Ground, How One Can Contribute to the Policy Discussion in the Country. Next slide, please. So I think that 1980s and 1990s, all these experiences are very well documented in a book called Out of the Shadow of Famine. It was done by Rashidin Ahmed, at that time director of the Markets Division, Stephen Hackblade, and Tawfiq Alahi Chaudhry, who was Secretary of Food at that time, now is an advisor, economic advisor to the Prime Minister. So it has quite substantive information. If you think about the food security spectrum of issues, I think this book has fantastic documentation as a case study. And during this period, again, what happened was the hands-on support on building national capacity. All right, next slide, please. So now it's a new timeline that we are talking about, 2001 through 2009. So there are two major work. There are many smaller projects. One was the food aid leakage study. Country was still getting over 500,000 tons of wheat and rice to distribute to the social protection program. So did that study, leakage was estimated, and some recommendation was suggested in terms of changing the modalities. We cannot go all into it, but eventually it was a unique collaboration, 7 different ministries and donor agencies, and most of the recommendation of that study subsequently incorporated into the national food policy. So last document here is the national food policy. They're the first ever comprehensive strategy document, National Food Policy 2006. IFPRI provided direct contribution to developing their strategy, which subsequently formed the basis for several policy and strategy documents by the governments of Bangladesh, including the country investment plan. So the picture on the right-hand side, that is a brochure from IFPRI documenting all of this IFPRI's work in the country during that period. Next slide, please. So now, come 2010 onward, IFPRI started a program called Policy Research and Strategy Support Program for Bangladesh. And under that is the USAID funded program. Again, we come back to the same issues, providing data, intelligence, analytics. So this project had created this database called Bangladesh Integrated Household Survey, which is a very popular data set, downloaded several 100,000 times now, from graduate student to country collaborators to everyone. So, and this data set also important in the context of a very widely used indicators, which is widely used across UN agencies, partners, and all. It's called the Women's Empowerment in Agriculture Index. It started with that Bangladesh Integrated Household Survey. It has become, if you look at the IFPRI's mandate, this BIHS survey has become a real global public good. Next slide, please. Okay, so 2010 onward, I continue. As Channing pointed out, we do a different way. We carry out randomized control trial now to test hypotheses, test feasibility of various program and transfer modalities. So that is what you see, that IFPRI is adjusting to the changing realities in terms of analytics as well as changing context. So this transfer modality research initiative, it is actually, there's a partnership with Cornell University. It has generated quite a bit of evidence, especially the behavior change communication that led to the significant reduction in child stunting, and government itself decided to scale up using their own resources from the revenue budget. I think that is a real accomplishment. And the second part that we're looking at is agriculture, nutrition, and gender linkages. So this is, again, think about it, definition of food security now include availability, access, utilization, stability, and inclusiveness. So when you work on this kind of experiment, we are trying to capture all aspects of the definition, modern definition of food security. So that project also generated quite a bit of evidence, published in really top journal, and IFPRI's engagement continues. Next slide, please. I already talked about it at PMU, Bangladesh Food Planning and Monitoring Unit, but there is another contribution since 2010 that is setting up an agricultural policy support unit in Bangladesh with the Ministry of Agriculture. So pictured at the top, you see that this pretty influential Minister of Agriculture, Madam Atiya Chaudhary, USAID administrator, I think the Agriculture Minister, and you see Akhtar Ahmed there, who has been leading that program since 2010. All right, next slide, please. So what are the takeaways when you think about country-level engagements? So I think if you look at the success in the country, at the country level, continuity with deep understanding of the context, that is extremely important. It was important for Bangladesh. I think it would be important for all country programs. The reason is very simple. Think about it. In 2007-8, IFPRI generated a lot of information, and that was feasible because of the country-level presence. Similarly, in the context of COVID-19, IFPRI was able to generate timely information because of country-level presence, having that intelligence. So in Bangladesh, I think that has been the case, and having that institutional capacity building, partnership with them, continuous partnership can be particularly important. Last is the high-level policy engagements. That, I think, is critically important because no matter how good your research is, no matter how rigorous you are, unless they're communicated effectively with some collaboration with the national partners, they don't get implemented. There are many research published, but in terms of action, we don't see that. So on the right-hand side there, in a picture, just give you an example of it. My former boss, Shangen Fen, Akhtar Ahmed, with the Prime Minister of Bangladesh. I think this was 2012 or 13, around that time. And then second slide is my current boss, Yeo Suinen, with the Speaker of the House, number 2 most powerful lady in the country, Dr. Shirin Sharmin Chaudhary. So let me take this opportunity, I'm towards the end, to give a tribute to 2 people who were instrumental in Bangladesh engagement at IFPRI. One of them recently passed away, Professor Nurul Islam, who was the first vice chairman of Bangladesh Planning Commission, knew the country really well. And then before that, he was the Director General of Pakistan Institute of Development Economics. The other person is Raisuddin Ahmed. He also passed away. He was the Deputy Chief in the Bangladesh Planning Commission. So when engagement started, that essentially provided momentum in the sense that they had clear understanding of the context and the issues. So with those, now also last one, I have to acknowledge another person standing next to Shangen Fen there is Dr. Akhtar Ahmed. I think he has been instrumental in designing the conditional transfer. He has been instrumental in taking these agriculture gender nutrition linkages and continuously remain engaged in generating data and evidence. With that, I thank you all. If you have questions, we'll go later.
Thank you, Shahid. That was great. I remember as a child, I lived in India and Sri Lanka, and discussions about Bangladesh. And one of the discussions was, should any aid at all go to Bangladesh because it's so hopeless? Will it ever go anywhere? And now Bangladesh, it's not heaven on earth, but it's a ton of progress. And it's a lesson for us as we face our own challenges today. And I think Shahid's comment on this continuous engagement and how that pays off is really important. And we're going to switch now and have Emily Schmidt come up and talk about new engagement, relatively, over the past few years in Papua New Guinea and how we're trying to work there. So thank you. Please, Emily.
Thanks, Channing. For the IT folks in the back, I have a presentation. If you could put it up, that would be great. So it was interesting to hear Channing's explanation of 3 buckets. And I'm going to show you in my presentation, maybe I took his 3 buckets and I've stacked them up. So when my slides come up, I can show you that as soon as they do. There they are. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a newer effort that's going on in Papua New Guinea. We've been working there with support from the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade in Australia since about 2018. And we've been trying to build and successfully, I think, building evidence-based agriculture sector dialogue in Papua New Guinea. So here are Channing's stacked buckets from my perspective in Papua New Guinea. When we started, we had to go in and understand what was actually going on in the country. And this is sometimes how these country programs set up. So I want to start at the bottom of this slide. And the key here was understanding kind of how we're going to go in with a medium to long-term agenda and how we're going to be able to benefit from what data assets and analysis are in country currently and how are we going to fill those gaps. In doing so, it's key and important to focus on that capacity strengthening and collaboration. And I think I've talked about that in earlier presentations. But this is across sectors, across government, across research institutes, identifying ways that we can work together. And that was a real key first step to, I think, building a successful program. The next step, once you've kind of identified the data and you've identified what needs to be filled up, is really bringing in and crowding in the resources that are available in country. And so we've really focused a lot on that capacity strengthening in a variety of different fora. This has included survey analysis training, it's included simulation, it's included all spatial modeling. We've kind of run the gamut. And that sets us up then to be able to, and what Shahid was talking about just a minute ago, be able to provide information to immediate needs. And these are the needs with, after trust and after understanding of the data and analysis environment, we're able to react and move quickly when specific short-term policy advice is requested. And a couple of examples of that was during COVID-19, there was a big question of what's going to happen if rice exports are banned. What are we going to look at in terms of price volatility in Papua New Guinea, who counts 98% of their rice consumption is from imports. There's some other ones, and I'm going to go into a few of them, so I'm not going to walk through them now. But what I'm going to do for the rest of this is I'm just going to give a little update on sort of that filling the gaps and setting the scene for you, and then I'll talk a little bit about those short-term policy requests and how we've gone about doing it, and I think it'll paint a nice picture of how we're working in some of these programs. Maybe. I might not. I think you may have run out of a battery. Nope. It's coming. There we go. All right, so as I mentioned, building this data inventory, what sort of options are there for us to work with government and for us to work with research institute? And one of the first things that's useful to do is look at the national accounts, understand how important, if we're looking from an agricultural perspective, is agriculture in the overall economy. And this goes beyond not only just production, but what we've talked about a lot over the course of this conference is the agri-food system. And here, IFPRI has put together and has analyzed across a wide range of countries what share of the agri-food system it comprises of GDP, right? So we have, if you look in the green, and I'll go through this quite quickly, green is sort of your traditional agriculture sector as it is defined, right? So this is production, livestock, forestry, okay? And that's typically the share of agricultural share of GDP number that you see in a lot of national accounts. But there's a lot of other important sectors in this agri-food system. We have traders who are coming in, wholesalers, packagers, right? We have processors as well, and those are in the orange and the red up here in the slide. But a lot of that is going to markets. It's also going to food services and hotels. So domestic food that's being bought and then served, right, is all connected to this agricultural sector. By disaggregating the national accounts, we can start to have a better idea of how important the agri-food system is within a country. So when we given that we've done this across a variety of countries, and we have a lot of country presence and experience across a variety of countries, we're able to compare and learn from each other. Shahid and I, who you've just heard about, we were lucky enough, well, I was lucky enough, to work with him in Ethiopia. Actually, we were both living in Ethiopia at the same time. Bart, who's in Myanmar, he also was in Ethiopia. And so there's all of this experience across different country programs. And we're able to pull in and crowd in different resources and understanding about which way and how to test and look at different opportunities for different countries. So here you can see, if we look across different countries, looking at this Ag GDP plus as it's named, the share of agriculture to GDP in Papua New Guinea of just that traditional agriculture is 18%, more or less. But when you add in all of those other parts of the agri-food system, we're up to about 26%. So it's not a small amount of the overall GDP. Another thing I want to share is we can then look at how important are those mid-value and downstream value chains, right? This is an addition of all the value chains. And perhaps is there space to start looking at investments and policies to strengthen them? And when we look across countries, and particularly the countries I've chosen here, perhaps there is opportunity in Papua New Guinea to expand some of those handling, processing, transport sectors in a way that would strengthen and make the agri-food system more buoyant. That's just a piece, though. These are the big national accounts. And if you're in Papua New Guinea, they would say, yeah, but if you go to East Papua New Guinea, that's entirely different from West Papua New Guinea, that's entirely different from North and South. And so being able to disaggregate and understand the overall economic environment in different areas of the country is quite important. And here what we've done on the right-hand side of the slide is we've gone in and done a very detailed rural household survey. This was just done in 2023. And now we're talking with government about different ways of investment and policy in different areas of the country. So I'm going to take about 2 slides to explain a little bit of the background on that 2023 survey. One big question was, how important is own agriculture versus purchases? Okay, so we did a really large consumption expenditure survey. Papua New Guinea still very much depends on subsistence agriculture, given that it's a low and middle income country. It also uses a massive share on average of its household income on food purchases, on the equivalent of food expenditure. 75% goes to food. So the question was, well, how much to what degree? Is this coming from your own garden? Is it going to markets? Do we need to focus on increasing production? Do we need to focus on improving market access? And so you can see on the overall sample here on the right-hand side, we've got a big share, 54% of the share of value of consumed goods is own produced. 38 is purchased, and it changes, right? There's areas where own production makes up a really important part of the value of food consumed. So clearly there's different entry points in different places. We also want to take that and understand the food security situation, but we want to link that also to certain nutrition outcomes. So on the left-hand side, we're just looking at calories per adult equivalent per day. This has been a really important conversation to have in Papua New Guinea. It's unfortunate my colleagues are not here. They told me they had another meeting, so they weren't able to make it, but from Papua New Guinea, there's been this big question about, are rural households getting enough to eat from their own production? And there's been a big debate. This evidence and evidence before that has opened up the dialogue with government, with research institutes, about food insecurity in the country and nutrition insecurity in the country. And here I'm showing averages. You can imagine a distribution. And only about 45% overall of individuals consume enough calories for a lightly active individual based on Papua New Guinea stature. So this is work that was done understanding calorie intake need of Papua New Guineans. But this is a rural household survey. And so rural individuals and farmers are actually quite active. They're more than lightly active. Okay. So this has opened a lot of questions, this opened a lot of dialogue with the government, also looking at not only calories, but nutrition. On the right-hand side, we put together some learning tools for some of the University of Papua New Guinea off of earlier work, looking at what would be a healthy plate. And so we spent a lot of time working with food-based dietary guidelines to try and understand at a local diet what would be a healthy plate and use visuals to demonstrate this. So we take those calories per adult equivalent here, and now on the right-hand side, I'm showing by grams. Okay, so I'm not showing calories, but a bit different metric. And you see staples on the blue is the recommended diet. On the right is what we're seeing in the survey sample, okay? So the diet is heavily made up of a lot of staple carbohydrates. These are roots and tubers, and a lot less so in vegetables, fruits, and protein-rich foods. So now we're starting a conversation about how to diversify some of those diets. This becomes really important in short-term guidance on policy, okay? And having the data at our hands, being able to analyze it quickly and address the needs and questions of policymakers is key. And that needs to be done with an environment of trust. So the first one, just last year, the Deputy Secretary of the Department of Ag and Livestock called up. There was a policy that was implemented to ban all imports of poultry coming from specific countries. One of them was Australia. They were worried about bird flu, Asian bird flu. We were quickly able to mobilize, looking at the share of imports of poultry that come from different countries. So you can see on the red dotted line here that Australia represents a really important share of poultry imports in the country, okay? Those imports have been going up. Demand is increasing for animal source foods, and protein, as I've just showed in that earlier slide, is a deficit in the consumption diet. So we ran a lot of short-term simulations looking at this decrease in imports, talked about how prices would change, how consumption would go down, and walked through what could potentially be other policies beyond just an import ban. Another one that we've recently had in the fall was a question of El Nino. So there was a thought that a severe El Nino would be hit in Papua New Guinea, and that's really important because in the highlands, it almost decimates sweet potato production, which is a staple crop in PNG. So the question was, if we have a severe El Nino, what sort of effect are we going to see in production, and how are we going to see prices change? Well, using the survey data that I've talked about, right, we were able to quickly understand what the share of sweet potato was in the consumption of different areas. Okay. And we were able to simulate what a 50% drought-related decline in the highlands of sweet potato would look like. So here there's a variety of simulations looking at this percent decline. We also do another simulation in the short term and the long term. So I can go through the details with you after this, but this is just really illustratory. The other thing we did was start to talk with the government of how are we going to prepare ahead of time. So that, I think the most important is this below bullet, which is looking at replacing what the kilocalories that would have been lost given this type of a production shock, okay, would be needed from equivalent calories of rice, and how to start thinking about bringing those in rather rapidly. So I think I'm going to leave you with that. I think this kind of gives you a pretty good idea of what we're doing in a variety of countries, and Papua New Guinea as an example.
Thanks, many thanks, Emily. We're going to move over to actually Isabel Lambrecht, who's in Tajikistan, and this is an even newer program, so I'm looking forward to learning about it myself. So thank you. Please go ahead, Isabel.
Try to put up my slides. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, okay, let's see now. Okay, is the slideshow showing?
Not quite yet. Looks like it might be coming.
Okay,
You cannot see it. Isabel?
can you see it or not?
Let's see,
No.
we're waiting for it to come here. Hold on just a second. And we're back
Or
in.
otherwise, maybe we let it be controlled from the room. You have the presentation there as well.
I thought it was being controlled
That's-
from the room.
Oh. Okay, let me
Okay.
skip this here then. Oh,
Apologies. Do we need?
okay.
Here you go.
So they're going to control it, Isabel. Go ahead. It should come up
Oh,
in
thank you.
any second.
Yeah, I desperately wanted this first slide for you guys to see actually, because it has a picture of the country, and this country is quite unlike many of the others that we are working in. So let's see when it comes up, but I'll start talking already. So this is indeed a young country program, and the country is a little bit unfamiliar. Okay, this is not going on.
This is Emily's.
This is Emily's here. Okay, should I try to share screen again, maybe from my side?
Hold on just a second.
Okay.
You turn up the one in the
I don't
room.
understand why they have the slide. Emily, should she go ahead and try to share from her side? Wait just a second. There we go.
Here you go.
Oh, there
Finally.
you go.
Okay, thank you.
All right, okay. It's not yet in presentation mode, but at least you can see the picture and you can get a sense of how cold it can be here in winter, but it's also quite warm in some places in summer. Yeah, in terms of setting, so Tajikistan is located to the north of Afghanistan. That's usually the easiest way to explain its location to people. As you can see, this little weird red-shaped country there. So it's this is a landlocked country bordering also China, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan. Now, what's the rationale for working in that country? Well, this is the poorest country in Central Asia, and it's the 5th poorest country in Asia. But it's not very well known, and it's a small country. Now, this country is also very highly affected by climate change, while it does not contribute much to climate change. And you can see the picture below of these enormous mountains that the country has. This country is covered by an estimated 6 to 8% of its territory in glaciers. More than 1,000 of glaciers have actually already disappeared, and most other glaciers have severely shrunk by now. This leads to fluctuations in water availability and water quality. And moreover, of course, you have the other effects of climate change, droughts, floods, heat waves, extreme cold. And this does not only affect agriculture production or household usage of water, it also affects other things such as the energy sector. So if I'm dropping out of this anytime, that's because the main dam providing electricity for the country is about to be below the level of water that is needed to run the pumps to generate power. So more than 95% of Tajikistan energy is from hydroelectric power. Interesting to note as well is that Tajikistan used to be part of the Soviet Union. Then obviously upon secession of away from the Soviet Union, it has started a process again of decollectivization of its agriculture, but it's still having some problems in terms of its land policy. Next slide, please. Now, I had to smile when Emily showed this information about AgGDP plus. So Tajikistan was also part of this big agri-food systems diagnostics effort. And this is actually quite interesting to look at. What we see here is that the agri-food system at large accounts for 39% of its GDP. And primary agriculture for 25% of its GDP. That's much more than what we saw earlier for PNG. Actually, even though Tajikistan is a lower middle income country, if we look at this composition of GDP and the contribution of the agri-food system in there, it resembles more a lower income country. That's what you can see actually in graph A. Moreover, in its composition of the agri-food system GDP, you can see that primary agriculture accounts for about 2/3 of its GDP, of its agri-food system GDP. And again, there it more resembles a lower income country. So its status as lower middle income country, especially from an agriculture perspective, is maybe in part misleading. Let's go to the next slide. This is the final slide on background that I wanted to show you. So despite that primary agriculture only supplies about 25% of the country's GDP, it does employ about 61% of its workers. And the agri-food system at large employs about 2/3 of all workers in the country. So then where are all the others? Where are all the others going to, right? They go abroad. And that's actually why I wanted to show this really striking figure on the right of the slide, is figure 1. This shows the personal remittances as compared to GDP. And this is unbelievable. Tajikistan is the #1 country, relatively speaking, of personal remittances as compared to GDP in 2022. Personal remittances as compared to GDP were more than 50%. So what you have is a country extremely vulnerable to climatic shocks, such as climate change, but also external shocks. You have this huge dependency on migration for food security, for poverty reduction, and most of that is coming from Russia. And if you have followed, for example, the unfortunate events in the region recently, you can see how vulnerable migrants are to whatever happens. They may be sent back home, they may lose their job opportunities. On the other hand, what does this mean for the agricultural sector? You can see the picture of the women below picking cotton. Agriculture work, although agriculture is a big employer, agriculture work is really undervalued, underpaid. And even though women are generally not well represented in the workforce, partly also related to social norms, they are very much present as part of the agricultural workforce. And therefore, one also speaks about the feminization of agriculture in the country. And that's also in large part due to this massive outmigration of primarily men. Next slide, please. So that's in terms of setting, right? We are a young country program. We are just fascinated by this country setting. There has, however, been formal work ongoing in the country. Little work, but in the country and the region, sufficient to have connections, understand the local setting, and build on that. So previously, IFPRI had done survey work in the country. They had a dashboard, Tajikistan Spatial, an interactive data visualization tool around food security, and work embedded in regional programs. However, we have really ramped up since around 2022. So with any country program starting, which means that we now actually have staff on the ground based in Tajikistan, both local and international staff. But also one of the major programs that is ongoing, that is a global project that includes Tajikistan, is, for example, the Comprehensive Action for Climate Change Initiative. Focused on climate change and mainly at the policy level. It supports the Committee for Environmental Protection, And then, for example, there was this agri-food system diagnostics, which we are also linked to. Next slide, please. What's the rationale for a country program here? Well, there's a major lack of research-based evidence, and that's obviously what IFPRI stands for, right? And there's a lack of publicly available socioeconomic data to do your analysis with and to bring such evidence that would help the country make good policy decisions. So our country program can really contribute to this evidence base, and we are doing that already within this short time span. But also our presence here facilitates and improves dissemination of research findings. Somebody can just call you, and tomorrow you'll be there presenting your findings. You don't need to book flights or whatever. We can also showcase the power of our analysis and leverage demand for more knowledge-based decision-making and encourage future evidence-based policymaking. Please click once. And so this is a young country program, as you understood, but I wanted to show some of its successes at the early stage. And obviously, we're just happy with baby steps, right? But here you see a picture of IFPRI or of a colleague who's presenting at the COP27. There was a Tajikistan pavilion where IFPRI, which IFPRI supported. Basically, we have policy influence through embedded experts. We have, related to climate change, we have an expert supporting the Committee of Environmental Protection. We also have another expert, a separate person, supporting the Ministry of Agriculture and the Tajik Academy of Agricultural Sciences. These are dedicated people, particularly to policy and capacity building, embedded in these national structures. One of the successes recently was also striking. You know, usually we organize seminars and we invite people. This is a bit, a little bit of a supply-driven approach, perhaps, right? But recently we were called and asked to go and present findings at a government-led seminar. There was no push from IFPRI side, there was a demand from government side. And this, within such a short time span in such a young country program, is quite striking. There's a lot of interest from the government based on the findings we have of recent research in how we can better support their agricultural sector development plan. There's also demand for IFPRI data. We recently collected data, February, March 2023, and we signed several data sharing agreements because there's such a paucity of data. Anybody's just so happy to know and to have their hands on some data that can help them make informed decisions. And then there's a big demand for IFPRI-led training on research methods. Next slide, please. So opportunities ahead, there are so many, of course. And I would say they are on the one hand around, I can hear myself. So on the one hand, they are around these big topics like the climate-food-nexus, but they are inevitably intertwined with employment and migration, and they are both critical to poverty and food insecurity, and they are linked to women's empowerment and youth. So these topics, one has to work on it, and this could be delivering evidence through economy-wide models, through microeconomic household survey data analysis in combination with geospatial data. We should work more on evidence on adoption and scaling of innovations, and also work through impact assessments of related interventions. For example, my colleague Channing mentioned evidence on social protection in climate shocks. We are currently setting up an impact assessment with World Food Programme on a social protection program related to mitigating climate change, and that was actually established in response to an anticipated migration shock. And of course, none of this will go anywhere unless we continue to nourish our engagement with policymakers, our local government affiliated research institutes, and that we work with them. We start jointly, we look at what's the research priority setting, We work hand in hand on research design and then analysis and dissemination of findings. Next slide, please. So just some references that I've put in the presentation. And next slide. One more view on beautiful Tajikistan. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Isabel. So this gives an overview of places, 4 places where we have a strong presence. And now Kevin's going to come back and talk about Pakistan, Cambodia, where we're not as seeded, but also have presences. And then I'm going to ask Kevin to go through quickly so that we have time for questions and discussion. So please, Kevin Chen.
I will try to be quick, and my presentation going to take a slight different direction now. And I'm not going to talk about the country supporting program, but rather the new work we're going to do in Pakistan and Cambodia. And recently, well, actually since November last year, IFPRI signed a new TA with ADB. We're going to work on the 3 things. One is work on the forecasting of food security issue in Asia and Pacific. Second is we're going to build the food security portal for the Asia Pacific. Third thing is something I'm going to present just minutes on, is we're going to work on the food system assessment in 2 countries, Pakistan and Cambodia. And the main task for that particular component of TA is we want to work with ADB and in 2 countries, Pakistan and Cambodia, to move towards the sustainable and resilient food system in those 2 countries. We are using the tool, which actually already mentioned in PNG by Emily and Isabel in Tajikistan. And we seem to apply this tool already. And IFPRI developed a tool called Food System Diagnostic Assessment Tool, which is largely developed by Xingshen Diao and James Struess and their teams. And we've been applying that particular tool to almost 21 countries across the world. So, but not in Pakistan, not in Cambodia. So what we want to work in Pakistan and Cambodia. Next slide, please. Next, please. So it's really in response to the call for food system transformations. And if we look at what is happening, certainly this broad scientific consensus on food system, we are worried about the impact on climate change, diversity, health, diet, and the livelihood of farmers and urban poor, right? So how the food system transformation have all those possible impact. And we worry about the fragiles, and particularly the disease, and the water scarcity, population conflict, and forced migration, all those issues. And clearly, the past policy is no longer fit for the purpose, right? Our initial focus of the policy in the national level is always, can we produce enough? But clearly, towards the sustainable and the resilient food system become more important. So we need to look at the diet, we need to look at the biospheres, the production and resilience and livelihood all together. So we've been talking about how can we achieve the multiple win of all the time. So we needed to take the food system approach. So that's the core, why we want to work in Pakistan and Cambodia. Next slide, please. So well, I guess the back room cannot move, I can't. But anyway, so next is we really outline the challenge which faced in Pakistan and Cambodia. I don't want to go through details. You can see we see the key driver in the climate change, globalization, income inequality, and urbanization. In Pakistan and Cambodia face rather different, well, some similar challenge, some different challenge. And clearly the water is an issue. Majority of our population still live in the rural area, and migration become very important. And so smallholder are some way being threatened for many different aspects, and this rising threat of income inequality and during this rapid urbanization. So there are many newcomers, new challenge and new drivers. So build the sustainable and resilient food system become a necessity in both countries. Next. Then the question for us is, how can we help as IFPRI to do that? So the way we rely on, since we are the research organization, so we want to carry out the in-depth food system assessment in the country. Next slide, please. So the way we're going to do that, in particular that assessment, we hope that will help us to understand the challenge in the country and from the food system angle. That's very important. So we want to identify the transformation pathway in those two countries. We want to promoting the change in the policy and the strategy, and we want to help ensuring the stable finance. And we also want to support the ADB to identify potential investment opportunity. Next, please. So we're going to do 2 steps. Step number 1, we're going to apply IFPRI agri-food system diagnostic assessment tool and producing a report. So the report, I put the outline of the structure. Those are very typical outline for the food system assessment report, which is based on the model which is called the REAP model. And so we basically will take, once we finish this particular report, we're going to take this key finding with the policymakers, with the stakeholders in the country. So in step 2, what do we do? Next slide, please. And yes, yeah. We're going to conducting, well, we know based on the secondary data, even though we try to update the input-output table as updated as possible, it's still shortcomings. So what we're going to do is take this preliminary assessment report to the country. So based on the needs situation in the country, we're going to conduct consultation with the policymaker and the stakeholder, both at the central government level and the provincial, regional level of government as well. So based on those consultation, we're going to revise the paper to produce the new report. And I put the structure here just for the purpose of the information. So in the end of the day, what a government wants, for example, when we speak with Pakistan, they really want our work to fit into the formulation of a new food security policy they are going to work with. We're supposed to start in February, but we delayed that work because of the election in Pakistan. So, but we are hoping to start this work once they have a new state secretary for Ministry of Agriculture in place. We will start this work because the first dialogue started with him. So that's what we plan to do. Second is we want to support the ADB to come up with the investment priority and pipeline to support the Pakistan, Cambodia's move towards resilience and a sustainable food system. Particularly in Cambodia, they signed up UN Food System Task Force, so they have obligation to report their performance of food system work. So we are hoping this work will help the country in those two countries to move towards their directions. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, and I'll ask if Shahid and Isabel could turn on their cameras, and maybe we'll get to see them. I think, you know, just to kick this off, this question and answer session, you know, we wanted to speak about these programs because, you know, we're here at the ADB and we're on the cusp of a deeper relationship with the Asian Development Bank. And, you know, we've just signed a kind of a clearinghouse memorandum of understanding. And we're trying to put forward, you know, in the region, some of the things that we think that we're doing that are really relevant for the Asian Development Bank and how this interface might actually go. And we think the country programs in Asia are a really important vehicle for that potential collaboration. And so we're really open to your comments and questions on how to make this relationship function so we can meet these big challenges that Kevin spoke about, that Ismahan spoke about, that we all are working on. So please, I open the floor to questions from anybody. Yes. Let me see. We're probably going to need a microphone to go around. There we go.
Good morning. Good afternoon. Aura from Kasetsart University. Thank you, all speakers, for a very nice presentation. I have specific question to Ms. Schmidt. I was listening to the whole presentation, and towards the end, I was looking for some policy recommendations, which I didn't hear. So, thank you.
Yes, go ahead. Let's take a couple, or 2, 3, and then we can get the panelists to respond.
Margaret Juvatana from the Department of Agriculture, Thailand. I'm just wondering why Thailand is not in a country program.
That's
Southeast Asia, I mean.
Yeah.
Southeast Asia.
Okay. Yes, go ahead, please.
Good afternoon. I am Namge from Bhutan. Well, we have lots of assessment country report generated by different agencies. Here it's IFPRI. Sometimes FAO does it, FAO. Sometimes WFP does it. And then sometimes, or most of the times, these reports lands up on the shelf, and the country really do not implement. In case of Tajikistan, I think it's a unique scenario where the government came forward asking for the agencies to present the report so that they are going to follow it. So sometimes the country or the government are in a confusion state because there's one report from FAO, another report from WFP, another report from IFPRI, and all this thing. So how I would like to know how we can solve these kind of issues so that the government or the country has a focus issues. I mean, like a strategy to implement the things. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are great questions. Let's go start with Emily.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for your question. So some of the policy recommendations, let's take the poultry one, so the ban on poultry imports. What's really tough in a country where, you know, there's not a large livestock sector in Papua New Guinea, and so those imports are really important. Livestock feed is extremely expensive. So a couple of things happened. They were interested in understanding how to expand poultry domestically. Part of the ban was also to understand whether they could incentivize producers to produce more. But that takes time. It takes infrastructure. There's issues with cold storage and electricity generation. And so once we had done the analysis and seen the consumption drops pretty dramatically and prices increase quite dramatically as well, there were some conversations about perhaps rather than banning, thinking in terms of initially a tariff structure maybe that would then be financed to use phytosanitary facilities, to build phytosanitary facilities to actually be able to test for some of the potential pathogens that may be coming in through poultry. And so we creatively brainstormed through some of those issues. So that's one example. In terms of, I think you make a really good point about so many reports and how does the government, I mean, first, here comes IFPRI now, then here comes somebody else. I mean, first of all, the amount of meetings you have to sit through. A really important part and component, I think, of these country programs are what we have in most of them is called a National Advisory Committee. And so that National Advisory Committee is made up of government partners. Typically, we have someone from the Prime Minister's office, Ministry of Finance, definitely Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Planning. We usually have someone from the private sector. There may be NGO. And they are actually shaping the research agenda with us. And so a really important meeting I had not too long ago was with the Department of Agriculture and Livestock and the Prime Minister's Department in Papua New Guinea. And we walked through what are going to be the needs and where do they see the most important places for us to be inputting some of the research that we're working on. And I think that is absolutely key in order to make sure that you're talking to the right people and you're providing the necessary information that they're looking for.
Let's go to Shahid.
Kenny, I don't know if you can see me, but I'll try.
We can see you, so smile.
Oh, very good. Thank you. Thank you so much. I have a Modi quote on today. So on the questions about the policies and analytics, that was directed to Emily Smith. But the question is, do we have to jump on policies right away? I think as a research institution, we keep that question in mind. We want robust analytics to go into making policy recommendations. I think that is kind of a philosophy for independent international research organization. If there are issues related to short-term actions, that are easier. So that's what I think Emily has pointed out in terms of the export or import ban. But that again also, I mean, more analytics are needed, but the conversation can continue. I think that is the critical part. So in my presentation, I actually missed presenting last page of my presentation. I think if I did that, this answer to my colleague from Bhutan would have been clearer. Thing is, strategic engagement that IFPRI fosters, it is very different. This is not, IFPRI doesn't produce another review report for the country. So World Bank has a role in terms of producing country assessment report. You have those gray color report, red color report, all sort of reports. And ADB has its responsibility, public sector review, expenditure review report. But IFPRI's reports are different in the sense that we are not in conflict with any of those reports. What we do at the country level, we foster a strategic partnership with the civil society organization, high-level policymakers, and as a research institution, we provide the evidence, which can be inconvenient in some times, but that we discussed. And taking up that policies is essentially a decision of the political leadership. What we do is to generate evidence. And if our evidence is rigorous, evidence is acceptable, only then they go ahead, take up the action. So a key point is that I think IFPRI's operation modalities at the country level is different from the other reports that you have mentioned, my colleague from Bhutan. Thank you.
I'd like to ask Isabel to come in wherever she would like. You're muted. 4 years. Yeah. There we go.
Yes, I wanted to add to what Shahid was also saying around this coordination. maybe two things. On the one hand, of course, by being on the ground, you also have to really nourish your connections, use time sometimes away from research, but you take part in this donor coordination committees and so forth to understand what others do, to work together. Now, also what I have experienced now several times in different countries, because before I worked in country programs in Myanmar and Ghana, is that when we present and explain to others first, for example, what new data we will collect, there's some grumbling in the room. We already know this, and oh, WFP has data on food security, and FAO has data on something else. Once we go back and we present our findings, they're like, whoa, this is so interesting. Can you come? Can you tell us more? How about this? How about this? So there is really an added value in what we produce, but we sometimes really have to go through, we have to go through this first step, and people have to learn and to understand and see that what we do is more than diagnostics. Yeah, I think that's the little thing I wanted to add here.
Okay, great. Let's go to Kevin, and Kevin, answer the question on Thailand, please.
Actually, in my mind, I thought I thought Channing will answer that question. But let me talk about the policy, not just ending up another report. I think this is very important questions, and we are going to do assessment in two countries, Pakistan and Cambodia. So from very beginning, we want to make sure what we going to produce not going to end up on the bookshelf. And so that's why in the beginning, we seek the approval and from government. So we only work in the country that we have a clear demand. So when we solicited the demand, Pakistan and Cambodia are the two countries come forward for that particular study. So that will help us to set the better ground for whatever we recommend is going to be hopefully useful and not end in the bookshelf. And secondly, as I mentioned, the reason we wait to talk with the State Secretary of Pakistan to start this work is precisely for that particular reasons. We want to say what is the gap in the policy, because Pakistan requested us to work on update the food security policy brief. So that's what we aim to do. We're hoping because of that, we have high chance the report is not only just end up in the bookshelf. I hope so. In Cambodia, not so as clear as in Pakistan at the moment. We still are figuring out, but one thing I'm pretty sure, we're going to work with the ADB very closely to enhance their agriculture sector assessment. And that will lead to the new investment pipeline in Cambodia for ADB. So that means, if that's the case, and our report will not just as a report. But from the government side, we are still in the beginning stage of consulting with them. We know they have a demand, but in Cambodia, I think your question is more right, because in Cambodia, when I reviewed, I said that there are too many reports already from all sorts of agency, and so I tell myself I don't want to repeat anything. So hopefully, since we do going to be useful, not end up in the bookshelf. That's one. Second, why not Thailand? Good question. Because I got a question always, so why if we work in China all the time? So justification to work in China is China has been successful in two fronts: reduce poverty, put the food on the tables. So we thought China does something correct. So we want to work on the South-South cooperation. Summarize what we think did it right in China. Hopefully, it has implications for other developing countries. Thailand, same thing. Thailand is developed, has a strong capacity. That's probably another reason. Probably whether they need IFPRI or not, I'm not so clear. And we still work a lot in, we use Thailand in the way. For example, in 2018, we had the Global Nutrition Conference held in Thailand. Myself, when we do a Southeast Asia project, we had a workshop just in February, end of February. All right, you are there. We are working on the food system transformation and trade and the value chain development. Clearly, that tells you something. Thailand is very valuable partners for IFPRI. But how can we utilize that partner better? Depends on many things. One thing clearly is the funding issue. Where can we raise the funding to do that? Our sister, CGIR sister center like IFPRI, they have office there. Probably many others, I don't exactly know. So the question is, should we think about Thailand as a potential technical partner country to work with? My answer is definitely yes. In what way? That's always become the question of the money in the way. How can we support that? Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think that was a good answer. Are there other questions, or is there, I don't know if people are able to jump in from online. We have 20, 25 people online. A final question. We're near the end, so we can wrap up also, if you would prefer. It has been a long 4 days. So, well, thank you very, oh, is there one? So Shahid has his hand up. Please go ahead, Shahid.
Mine was a very quick intervention regarding Thailand. In the early years of IFPRI had very strong collaboration with the Thailand Development Research Institute. Actually, one of the DG there, I forgot the name, actually worked at IFPRI as a senior fellow in the 80s. So that kind of a smaller engagement continues. The question of setting up a country office is slightly different, because from a strategic point of view, we have a lot of poor, least developed countries where IFPRI's resources can be more optimally used than having a country program in Thailand. But that doesn't mean that we cannot learn from Thailand. And that is why we have this partnership with the Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multi-Sectoral Technical and Economic Cooperation, of which Thailand is a member. And regional trade work that we are doing, as well as value chain work that we are doing, that will be quite a bit of that. We have a focus on Thailand. Also, in the digital agriculture sector, my colleagues Bart Minton, Sudha Narayan, and Belton, they are looking at some issues, very contemporary issues, where Thailand is ahead of other member countries. It's like, for example, drone use in agriculture. What are the positive and negative externalities of that? I think learning those will be of value as global public good. And if we will continue to work on that, generating those evidence. But in terms of setting up the country program, I think priorities will be on more low middle income of the LDCs. Thank you.
You may. I'll just say brief. Please go. I'll just say briefly for the Philippines. I did go yesterday to NEDA and speak with NEDA, and I think that these forms of collaboration that Shahid's talking about, where the country offices in Papua New Guinea, for example, this is a $2.5 million a year kind of investment that's required, and it's required to have the continuity and the long-term perspective in order to get the results that we're looking for. But we can look at different engagements with the Philippines, with Thailand, and other places that have a presence or people coming back and forth. And as Shahid says, I think that could generate a lot of benefit, both for the country and globally. So please go ahead, and then we'll wrap up.
Yes, I got excited by the panels this morning about the, and Thailand is acting as a secretariat to IFPRI and APSIS. And so I have some thought on the use of this organization, international organization, IFAD and IFPRI, in helping in a bigger scale in the ASEAN region, wherein we really need this data analytics on the food security policy. And also regarding to some shocks on disasters for reserves, food reserves, which is now the trend in helping the countries, vulnerable countries. And so as we are always talking about realigning or changing our thinking towards a more efficient way of collaboration, then I do hope that IFPRI or IFAD will consider working with the ASEAN countries, ASEAN, the AMAP, particularly because in agriculture, and so that we could really be benefited regional-wise. Thank you.
So I'm going to give that to Kevin and give him 20 seconds, and then allow him to follow up with you bilaterally. Go.
Yep. Very quickly, and in response to your question, and the CGIR, and now worked with the ASEAN, we have an official program called the ASEAN CGIR Innovative Food Program operating in the ASEAN region. Philippines is one of our target countries for IFPRI part on the value chain and the trade. Yeah.
Yeah, Thailand too. Yeah, there we go. ASEAN countries. Thank you all very much. Thank you very much to our speakers. Thank you to Shahid and Isabel for coming online. Thank you to Emily and Kevin for being here. Thank you all for listening. We hope this was worthwhile, and you know, enjoy the weekend that is finally coming. Thank you very much.
Yes.